Greetings, my fellow felines, birds, reptiles, lizards, and other assorted totem animals. It's I, a goat, and I'm here to talk to you about a sporting bit of fiction about giant stompy robots and the people that pilot them. I'm here to talk to you today about BattleTech, A Question of Survival, by Brian Young. But what is this book about? Well, it's simple. It's about the future, and the future of the Jade Falcon and the Ghost Bear Dominion, and whether or not they will have one in these oncoming times in the Ilkhan era. But yes, that is primarily the idea. What you have is a story primarily about how the heck the Jade Falcons are going to come out, and something to lead into the oncoming, oh no, democracy has failed, civil war in the Ghost Bear Dominion that has been been teased about and fluttered about in the oncoming words for Dominion Divided. So if you're primarily interested in seeing what the heck the Jade Falcon are going to do to survive when they're not the one that is made out of the remnants of the people that followed Hazen and didn't die, and what I've heard some people colloquially call Clan Jade Wolf, that became like a guard clan during the Ilkhan stuff. Well, the big fight for the Ilkhan. Um, and then you have the remnants in the Jade Falcon occupation zone, which is primarily made of all the Solomon, Sibcos, and whatnot left behind, that couldn't fight or was just meant to hold the ground with basically nothing. So it's primarily about those very people in the occupation zone, followed by Ji-Chitsu. Ji-Chitsu, I believe that is how it's pronounced. If I mispronounce that, I am very sorry. I am massively dyslexic and terrible at pronunciations. If I am saying that wrong, I will endeavor to look up videos to see how people pronounce it, but that's kind of how I've been reading it in my head. Alongside that, you follow Star Colonel Emilio Hall, as he and a bunch of Sibcos that he's kind of organizing a big war games trial of deal with the situation with the tensions and the kind of cultural upheaval going on in the Ghost Bear Dominion, primarily dealing with the nature of the voting going on whether or not to join with the newly formed Star League, and kind of the cultural around the vote itself, with the nature of voting for what and who and how that affects them as a people. Um, Not going into spoilers, both these two sort of stories work really well at just kind of detailing a culture that is on the cusp of extensive change. In the Ghost Bears case, it is this vote and all the things surrounding it and how it affects people's perception, other things. It has a very clear bent to keeping some of the things going on in the world at the time. So there is definitely a kind of element of that you can feel going on throughout the novel, with just how this vote is being used and the context to how some characters have framed it and who are contextually as yes, I am the symbol of democracy character, I am the guy who believes in it. And how they're used in the story can kind of be very much taken as a sort of idea with what's been going on primarily, I think, in the US, since BattleTech is primarily a thing made in the US, so it's going to definitely be affected by a lot of the culture there. So I definitely think I very much enjoyed that. It's mostly a minor thing, and it also just kind of serves to build up to that big Ghost Bear civil war that we'll be seeing in Dominion Divided, or just whatever is going to be happening with them in Dominion Divided. And as with the Jade Falcon, it's more about how are they going to sustain themselves and going forward, and eventually they kind of clash with the Ghost Bears in this upcoming novel for a big gambit. I think generally this is I really like this book. I had to sit on it for months after reading the first two chapters and loving it. Primarily, mostly just because of work. I got bogged down with a shit ton of commissions, and just could not read for the longest time because I was just so tired, or I would just fall asleep before I could, when it came to reading before bed, as I kind of like to do sometimes. But it was very much a amazing read when I finally got back to it just recently and just sat down and reread the entire thing. And I still very much like loved all of it. I loved meeting all the characters and following them and just kind of seeing where they go. Some of them take a little bit to get going and where you see what they're doing with the story, but generally it is a very good kind of just slow build to this big on conflict. Um, which honestly was not the best part of the novel. For me, like I really liked the character drama and whatnot that we got towards the middle and end half. Um, there were some bits with the characters that were just very fun, or very sad in one case, and just kind of helped to play up and enthrall yourself in the story. Whereas when you finally got to the big old shooty shooty bang bang stompy stompy robot bits, it was still good. It was very well written, and you could get a good sense of like the tactics and how it went through. But at that point, it was like you kind of got the gist of what was going to happen in the end. Um, and then like getting through that was like fine. It's just you saw what was coming. That was the one thing I definitely say is the not best part of the novel is that it's fairly obvious, or like it you know where it's coming, or at least in my case as a person who's read a bunch of fiction, I was very much aware where this was probably going to be going, and I was not surprised by that. But the way it was written and portrayed and given to you makes the journey to those points very well and very enjoyable. So I think that kind of deals with that issue if that's something that you personally are particular about. Because I always believe it's just the way something is told or presented is always the thing. Even if it's a story you know, as long as it's presented in a very enjoyable manner or a very like interesting way, can always keep an old story fresh. So very much, I think, without going into spoilers, it is a very enjoyable little tale, and I would highly recommend checking out this story. But now we're going to move on to the spoilers. So please, if you wish to read this novel, please go and check out Drive Through RPG, or go over to insert random link for various store, be it Amazon or uh, maybe Fortress. I don't know if they sell books. I buy most of my BattleTech stuff online from them if I need to. But yeah, not affiliated with them. Just like their storefront. So go over to them if you want to buy BattleTech stuff, because they are good. But yeah, spoilers! Spoilers! I'm probably going to put up an infographic, and if I'm not lazy, make it spin. Whoa. Yes, the spoilers. So, let's get on to them spoily bits. Uh, so, going from the very beginning level, I think the first two chapters, like I said, very good. I think the literal opening chapter helped really set you in this kind of current era, where you kind of have the Ghost Bear Con going in and meeting with Alec Ward, who I haven't read all the novels, and I have tangential knowledge from reading his Sarna page and other people talking about Alec Ward as a character. From this, and from my own kind of interpretations and reading on Sarna, I already didn't like him because he just felt like a. I don't know if this is the right kind of way of framing it, but the competent character sort of arc, the competent man sort of story arc, where he's just so good. He's just so good, man. Ugh. That like he just came off as like, oh, this sounds like the most milquetoast boring, like I'm the good leader kind of thing. The most interesting prospects I heard about him was that he's just being a dick to the Jade Falcon, not out of a sense of like the Warden style philosophy of honor, but just to screw over the Jade Falcons in the end, which I think was the most interesting. And that also kind of fits into how he's primarily portrayed in this novel, as Alec is kind of like he's kind of like someone who's so high up on his own ego that he's just slowly just gonna do some stupid shit. And you kind of get that, and he's kind of like just smarmy and full of himself when you just kind of meet him, and then does something very stupid at the very end of the novel that I'll talk about here in a second. Uh, but yeah, like you just you know he's a shitbag is what I mean, when you read that first opening chapter where you see the Ghost Bear Con, I forget their name, speak with him and him kind of insult them for like not slaughtering some children of the clan Wolverine when they were doing the big extermination of them way back when. So it's like, ah, yeah, framing, framing a guy against another group of people who were like, maybe let's not shoot the children and some old people while they're running away from their entire culture being burned down. So yeah, that it definitely frames how this particular story wants you to feel about Clan Wolf, and largely probably how the some of the Ghost Bears will be feeling towards him, especially towards the end. But then we move on to the Jade Falcon, how they're basically just like they're up a creek with no paddle, and the paddle is made of straws or spoons. It's taped together with not correct tape. But they're working on it. They have people, and they have one merchant who did not go join Maven in their hey, let's make Canopus 2.0, I guess, kind of sort of situation. So they got one big old vault ship. They got some people. They got a bunch of mechs, but they ain't got no people to put in those mechs. So they pretty much like are like just dealing with like the worst possible situation. And I think this is kind of one of the best bits. Is I was not that super enthralled with Chisu or Chisu J-Y, I think it's I or C. Jisoo the Con of the Jade Falcon. I don't know if I pronounced his name right. I'm dyslexic, so words and pronunciation can be a bit tough for me. But just as long as like you know the character I'm speaking about. There we go. But yes, his whole story and his character actually does more enthrall you to want to see what he does going into the future, because he's kind of like the leader who's like, okay, shit's up bad, we need to fix some stuff. It's time for change. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do all we can to just not be horrible monsters. I want to redeem my people, and he's kind of like the hopeful looking towards the future, but also like the future means we need to change and we need to evolve as a people, like that sort of kind of character. And the way he's written and the way he interacts with characters kind of endears you with him, where he's kind of slightly aloof. Like he literally has that sort of looking towards the future and asking a question. I think one character like thinks about that, and when we read it for a bit, and like he's like, I gotta play these hard gambits because if we don't, we're dead. If we do, we might be dead or not, but we're gonna do it anyway because we're gonna risk it because it's all we have. And it gets you into the book really well, and kind of just invests you in his character. He's not like super dynamic. None of the real characters in this novel change all that much. It's more about the nature of the situation, because most of them are kind of developed at this point of who they are. The most we get is a cadet who we follow called Alexis, and her kind of story I really like the best. It has a really interesting bent towards looking at Clan Ghost Bear and their whole kind of family idea, because that their shtick is they all like treat each other like family, and that's kind of their clan's kind of core concept is they have the concept of family in comparison to the rest of the clans, where they're like, no, let's not do that, or like their concept of family is very different and more like just pure warrior culture sort of stuff. And the way the novel takes that is very interesting, and just kind of both playing towards the tensions and like how old kind of problems are arising, where there's like, oh yeah, no, we don't mistreat our freeborn any much. We don't make them not as like well treated as us. Whereas her circumstance kind of contradicts a lot of what the philosophy or like the big ideas that Ghost Bear says they represent versus the reality, I guess, or like the worst possible situation that you can have in that culture. Like for me, as a person, I kind of interpreted her story to be sort of like, I don't know, being sort of in an abusive sort of household, because she has like her two best friends, and then the one kid who is always treated better in the context of her Sibco. And like you fall through, and while she's like rising to the ranks, she always gets screwed over by her trainer slash like den mother thing, and how like they're supposed to love each other, but it never feels like it. It feels like she's always just using her as a means to prop up her favorite, which is this other kid who I'm blanking on the name of. And I actually really like how they then, because I was not expecting this kid to kind of turn around because he was a shithead to her and her friends through most of the story. Because at the very end, when what happens is Jisoo goes to the Ghost Bear, they have this huge conglomeration of like Sibcos, like hundreds of kids who are going to do some war games to practice and do stuff before they go do their trials. So he bids his big old vault ship with big stuff to make it impossible for Emil Hall to not take his trial possession. He eventually wins, takes all these kids, and then Alexis, because they have the whole democracy, like we're supposed to vote and have a choice in our culture, they try to deal with the trial and say, "Hey, no, we refuse. I'm going to make a trial refusal," and they deny her that because it's like, "Ha ha, child." And then the dead mother kind of basically wants to kill them, but can't because they get sent off to the Jade Falcons. And then she also, because they got the shithead kid to help them with their plan at the end, because he also was upset because he was freaking out because it's like, "Oh my god, my future's going to be taken away from me." Um, he kind of just like more joins up with them, and it's really interesting because again, it's like, and how I interpret it, it's like an abusive family where it's like the one kid who didn't get abused, uh, in the end finally feels what it is and kind of grows with them, or that like they reconcile to some degree. I don't know if that's like true to life or it's just a story thing, but that was interesting in how that was presented, and I very much enjoyed that kind of seeing that story develop over the course of the novel. And then we get to Emilio Hall himself, who is basically the definition of "I believe in democracy. I believe in the future." And he kind of is our cemented character for the Ghost Bears like situation in their culture, where you have this character who is like, "I personally don't believe we should join the Star League, but no matter what, I'm going to accept the vote because I believe in the system. I believe in democracy." And like he tries to avoid like dealing with like arguments with both his kind of uh person below him. I'm forgetting the rank that it is, but he's like a star colonel. I think star commander. I don't know. I'm forgetting what it is right now, but he's basically his like a second in command that's like right next to him. Being the opposite, she's like, "Oh no, we needed to join it," and so that kind of is the back and forth where we see like the political tension going on between people and how there's been some riots, there's some disagreement on the nature of like which planet it is because all these votes come in at the slimmest margins. And so people like are very high on tension and like you get a lot of just back and forth with his story about this. And you kind of endear yourself to Emil. And it plays its hand really early. Like there's a scene where he's talking with some Sitcos that come to talk to him. He's talking about his mech and they're questioning him. Um, and at that moment, I was like, "Ah, yes, he's got this big kind of grandfather, like, ah, yeah, I'm a grandpa. I'm your nice grandpa who's going to teach you some lesson, sort of stuff." And I was like, "Oh, you gonna die." I knew from that page that he was somehow going to die in this novel because he represents democracy in a society that is like on the brink of like fighting each other, and that is exactly what happens at the end. And it is a he gets it hard. How he gets it is just it's not like, "Oh god, I'm crying," but it's just like, "Oh, that sucks," kind of sort of death. But not like in a you're mad kind of way, but in just like you tried your gambit, man. You did everything you thought was right to try, and just you could not get out of this situation. It's like what you feel for a character, but you know that they're locked into their doom. And it sets up a lot of the kind of mood that I feel like we're gonna maybe see when Dominion Divided comes out, and that source book, and we get to see like, "Oh, here's what the stuff is going on with Ghost Bears," a little short story or a little tidbits. Like all the source books have been because they've been absolutely amazing. Um, but yeah, like his story's great, and kind of how it compounds and deals with the nature of the situation with the Ghost Bears, as like they're dealing with the future. Because freaking after they do all the vote, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna join the Star League." Havoc Ward is like, "Y'all didn't vote unanimous. Fuck off." And if you don't get a unanimous vote to join me, I'm going to war against you. Or I don't. It's one of those things where you don't even know what he wants, and also the characters kind of question that, but you also know that it is completely in character because he feels like such a character whose own ego requires this just vast like swathing and praise to it that you just are like, you are so dumb that in like a good way. It's like, wow, you're so dumb, that this will cause so much conflict for yourself, but also creates like kind of good crux to the story, and kind of highlights the sort of like idea going on. Whereas like basically kind of like people refusing to commit to democracy in a way, I guess, because that was the whole shtick with Emil, and thus by extension the Ghost Bear kind of narrative as a whole when it came to all the stuff following him. Um, but yeah, so it makes a really good like little like linchpin for the actions that happen at the very end, and whatnot. But yeah, like in the end, I really recommend this novel. I think a lot of the character work is very good. While the action is like it's good, it's not really it's not what you're coming for. There's not like a like, oh yeah, this is a gangbusters, bing bing boom, plow, pew 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 pew, laser beam sort of thing. It's a yes, character study and also culture stuff, and then like seeing things we're gonna see later on and getting like hyped up for that. I think if you were interested in seeing like a tidbit of like the situation for the Ghost Bears in the new source book coming, you'll definitely really enjoy this. Um, as a person who's slowly getting into BattleTech and reading the fiction, I think in terms of beginner recommendations, this would be like a kind of go for it if you've read Tomorrow Rising, the source book, or have done a little bit of research to see, oh, okay, this is what this is about. It's not like the most needed thing, but like a little bit of context does help. And the book does try to explain a bit of stuff. It's just it's always there's always one of those harder things when it comes to things that tie into narrative things. It's a bit hard to judge like whether or not it is, because I've read the source books, so I know what's what. And I don't particularly think it's gonna be that hard to pick up on what's going down. It's not like a novel where it's like it's three sequels in. But I think a little context, just probably Googling like, oh hey, what is Tomorrow Rising, and reading the starter page for that will probably be all you need, like just to get the gist of like, oh okay, this is what happened with them, so they're this and then that. So something simple like that. If you are afraid of like having to deal with any like lore pop in, I think still it still works well as a kind of good easy grab for anyone who's like casually aware of the current story right there. Um, so yeah, that would be my sort of new person reading BattleTech sort of thing. If you read any of the source books, you're completely fine because you're like, oh yeah, I'm in. But if you like were to be like, oh yeah, I just started playing BattleTech, I'm going to pick up a random novel. I think a little bit of context would be helpful, but for the most part, not too bad. So in terms of like levels of like, oh no, deepness, you're fine. You're just gonna like have to infer a little bit, where you're not gonna have to like kind of guess at like whole swaths of stories. Just, oh, okay, they got fucked up. These people are doing this. This is the characters performing. That kind of thing, thankfully. Because there's no real like super like big continuity characters who are like you follow through like years of things. But yeah, I like I said, I recommend this novel. If you wanted to pick it up, it is available through Drive Through RPG, um, or you can get a physical copy through Amazon or your local bookseller thing. I'll put a link down in the description below, where you can presumably get it, or like places I like in like buying things from, if it's like a tabletop store, which can like Fortress, they are the good BattleTech peeps. But yeah, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you enjoyed me rambling about and talking about this novel, well, look forward to more coming soon, as well as other Talk with BattleTech videos, along with some other art-related stuff coming in the future. So please subscribe, or like, or do all the thingamabobs that you need to do for the YouTube video shenanigans, and I hope to see you in the next video. Also, comment below what you thought if you've read the novel, or have begun reading the novel, or any other BattleTech novels that you perfectly think, or your general opinions about the current era in general. Let's just talk about BattleTech and how it's freaking cool, because BattleTech is freaking cool. Alrighty, hope you all have a great one, and goodbye.